Hi everyone, welcome to a new reading vlog. This is going to be my A Little Life reading vlog, and there will be spoilers. So if you have not read the book yet and you don't want to be spoiled, you should probably not watch this video. Also, this book has a lot of trigger warnings, so this vlog is going to be talking about those trigger warnings like as they happen and as I read these traumatic events happening. So if you know that you have a trigger or you need to know them before I talk about it or before you read the book or whatever, I will have in my description down below a list of all the trigger warnings. It's quite extensive from what I've seen from other people who have completed the book. So I'll try to get a whole list of all the trigger warnings in my description. And if there's any that I forget, please comment them down below so that I can add it to the description. So I picked this up yesterday and I already started it. I am 123 pages in and do a very good job of starting this vlog. I tried to check in a little bit last night, but I think my thoughts, because it was so late, were a little incoherent. So I'm just going to recap kind of what I said in the clip that I filmed last night. So if you don't know what this book is about, it is about four guys who went to college together and now they've gone to New York to try to make it with their careers. And so far we've just been getting like the backstory of three of the characters, and then the main character, Jude, he's still kind of a mystery. We're starting to see a little bit into his past. I've been trying to mentally prepare myself to read this, and I haven't gotten like to the thick of things yet, so I'm kind of nervous to read it actually, but it is really, really good. It's a huge book, like 800 pages, 815 or something like that. And so the first 123 pages that I've read so far have been kind of getting to know the characters and kind of setting the stage for the story. I can tell that I'm like trying to kind of close myself off to the characters because I know that this is going to be depressing and heartbreaking, and I'm just trying to kind of like protect myself. But I'm really, really liking it so far. I really like the writing style. It's very gripping and I'm already invested. But like I said, I made it 123 pages in, so I'm like part of the way through chapter 1 of the second part. So I've read the scene where Jude cuts himself and he needs to get taken to a doctor to stitch him up and bandage him and stuff like that. And we go through Willem's point of view for that. The next morning or whatever after that incident, Willem is like, we need to talk about this. And Jude's like, I'm fine, it's not what you think. And Willem in his head is like, I should say, Jude, are you trying to kill yourself? Jude, why are you doing this? Like, Jude, do you need help? And instead he just says, okay. And I just think that scene like shows how some people handle like being confronted with something scary like that, and how they just want to accept the reassurances that that person is saying and like, no, I'm fine, everything's fine, like you misunderstood. And they're so quick to latch on to that and be like, okay, everything's fine, phew, I don't have to do anything, because that would be uncomfortable. And it's just really interesting to see, like, you see Willem's thoughts, like, he should say this, he should have said this, he should have done this, but it's not easy to say those things. So he was given an out by Jude's reassurances and he took it. But we also started to get a little bit of Jude's past, like after the 100-page mark. So I haven't read very much of it, maybe 20 pages, where we start to see like Jude's after like his childhood, like when he's talking to, I don't know if it's his social worker, or if it's his therapist or his caseworker. Anna is who I'm talking about. So we kind of see like the results after that, like before he meets his friends in college. So we still don't know exactly what happened to Jude, but we know it's something terrible. And Anna tries to encourage him to talk about it, because the more he closes himself off, like the worse it's going to get and the harder it's going to be to talk about it. And she ends up dying before he even gets the chance to talk about it with her. And she was the one that he like trusted and relied on. And so now the last line that I read was, but she was right about one thing. It did get harder and harder. He did blame himself. And although he tried every day to remember the promise he'd made to her, every day it became more and more remote until it was just a memory. And so was she, a beloved character from a book he'd read long ago. So it's kind of setting it up for Jude to not have the ability to talk about his past, which he hasn't talked about with his friends, at least yet. So that's where I am right now. So yeah, I'm gonna go try to finish chapter 1 from part 2. I'm actually gonna try to go finish all of part 2, and I will update when I feel the need to do so. All right, I've made it to page 323 in A Little Life. So I just finished part 3. I'm on part 4 now, chapter 1 of part 4. So I got a decent chunk read today. So let's talk about what happened. Harold and Julia asked to adopt Jude, which was great, which is amazing, and I for sure thought that somehow that was going to be ruined somehow, like it wasn't going to happen, because I think I've heard so much about how depressing and how sad this is, and how all this stuff just keeps happening, and it's so traumatizing and emotionally taxing that I keep thinking that it's just going to be constant terrible things. And so I'm glad that it did happen, and it's a happy moment. I mean, not that Jude isn't still going through some intense stuff, but yeah, I thought somehow that was going to get ruined, so I was like nervous when that's like whole thing. I was like, oh, how is this going to get messed up? Like, what's going to happen here? And it was fine. Oh, we see Jude's cutting scene, that scene where he asked Willem for help. We see that from Jude's point of view now. And just we spend more time in Jude's point of view. Now that we've passed like the 100-page mark, we see more about his past. We learn more about him and his thought processes. And he very frequently says like how he thinks he deserves the punishment and how he must have done something bad. And like his self-hatred is so intense that it's heartbreaking. It really is. Oh, so talking about the adoption, Jude talks about like after it goes through and everything and they go and they make it official, he talks about feeling whole and how like he didn't feel the need to cut that night, and you know, maybe he was getting better, getting healthier, and then he just like twists it. Like I wrote that down, like, oh, he's like starting to feel whole, and then he immediately twisted it and was like, I know eventually they're gonna not want me anymore, they're gonna change their minds, but I'm just gonna be happy right now and not worry about when I ruin things. And it's just like he's just constantly expecting himself to ruin things. And that's so sad. So yeah, we're seeing a lot more of like the friendships as they last through the years. So this story doesn't just stay in one, in a short period of time. It's over a span of several years, and I'm assuming it will go like for their lives, because at the part I'm at now, they're like 39, I think. And their friendship is just, the whole group's friendship and Jude and Willem's friendship are just, they're really something. Like, the found family aspect is really something. And the scene that I just finished on was JB, like his whole chapter about him talking about his drug addiction, and when Jude tries to come and help him, and he's like, I can't get away from this. I have to go up there. I can't leave. That part was really sad. And then eventually Jude gets Willem and Malcolm to come and like save him and like get him help. And JB like gets all defensive and makes fun of Jude, and Willem just like gets so upset and punches him, and that's where we left off. So I really, really like the writing. The storytelling is just captivating, and this is a very character-driven book. There's like, the plot is the characters' lives. It's not like a plot, not like a plot. Yeah, there's not much of a plot. It's very much just about the characters and their lives, and I'm loving it. So I'm really, really enjoying this book. I think I said I am 323 pages in, so not quite halfway. It is getting late. I have to work in the morning, so I think I might end there for the night, and I will pick this up again tomorrow. All right, I am getting ready to pick up A Little Life again. It's been a couple days since my last update, so I want to get a good chunk of it read today. I would like to get at least halfway through. I think I need to read 2 chapters for it to be an even break, so chapter 3 of part 4 is where I want to get to. So I have chapters 1 and 2 to read, and I'm going to go try to get those done right now. I just finished chapter 1 of part 4. That was tough to read. So a lot of my notes are about hating Caleb, essentially. He's verbally abusive, physically abusive. He's an asshole. And I hate him. But I feel more, I feel more angry than anything right now. We did not end that chapter on a good note. Jude is just being abused, and he made a comment saying, he thought he had been punished enough even for him, because he has so much self-hatred that he thinks that he deserves this, and he thinks that he can't do better than an abusive boyfriend. And at the end of the chapter where he says, like, about the axiom of equality, how he will always be the person who he was, and how X will always equal X. Yeah, that was a lot. That was a lot to read. Well, I am nearing halfway. I'm going to try to finish chapter 2 before I go get some dinner. And then maybe I'll come back and be able to finish chapter 3 of part 4 tonight. But I might need to take a break if it's going to continue like that. Hey everyone, we are on our way to go, well, Brandon's gonna go fishing. I'm gonna put out my chair and read. So I just thought I'd quick update you that I finished chapter 2 of part 4 last night. So I'm gonna try to get 2 more chapters read today. So finish part 4 and then start part 5. So yeah, that is what we are doing right now. All right, I read chapter 3 of part 4, so now I am on to part 5, which is titled The Happy Years. So we got into a lot of some pretty graphic and traumatic things in this chapter. So Jude started thinking about committing suicide. And it has the whole discussion of like once he like made that decision, how he felt more hopeful and he was happier, because like that's one of the signs of somebody on the verge of wanting to kill themselves, is that once they make that decision they tend to feel happier, and it's like a warning sign. And then we got to the very graphic description of Jude trying to kill himself. So cutting both wrists like very deeply to try to kill himself. And then we had a flashback to Brother Luke manipulating Jude and taking him away from the monastery and continuing to manipulate him into prostitution. And that whole thing was so heartbreaking. Like, and Brother Luke and then like some of the clients would say like, oh, you were made for this, you were born for this, like. So then we flash forward back to Jude waking up in the hospital after his suicide attempt, with Willem there and with Harold there, and Andy I think is there, and like just his thoughts once he starts coming back to the world. And then there is a discussion, which I thought was handled well, about drugs and like prescriptions, and how like yes they can dull the pain, but they tend to dull everything else then, so they kind of zombify you. I thought that was an interesting insight. We go over Willem asking Jude if he can like ask him questions about his past as like a birthday present, and Jude is finally like, I know I need to talk about it. And he's kind of going back to Anna and like being like, how am I supposed to talk about it, because I've let it go for so long, so many decades, that it's too hard to talk about now. And Jude thinks, like, before he tells Willem anything, he thinks in his head, this is Willem, he would never hurt you, not ever, it's time. And I just love that part, because like I love Willem and he's such a good person and a loyal friend, and I want Jude to open up and talk about it with somebody that he trusts, and I think Willem is the best person for that. We also learn that Brother Luke is the one who taught Jude about cutting, because Jude was trying to self-harm by like throwing himself into a wall when he was being forced into prostitution. And Brother Luke like tries to kind of be like, oh, that you're, the clients don't like to see you bruised, so let's try to channel it into a different way. And it kind of leads to Jude's like reliance on that. And then we finally get to the part where Jude where Brother Luke gets caught and Jude gets taken to the doctor, and they kind of find out about everything that's been done to him. So he's going to be put, he gets put with Anna, which we know from the beginning is like his caseworker, his social worker, or somebody like that. I don't know what exactly her title was, but and then the last thing that we talk about is how Luke is like in everything that Jude does now. Like it says his love of reading, of music, of math, of gardening, those were all Luke. And his fears, his cutting, his hatred, his shame, his diseases, his inability to have a normal sex life, to be a normal person, those were Luke too. And it's like, it just really shows that Jude can't escape his trauma. He can't. It's always with him, and it follows him through his life, and it's constantly present to him. It's who he is. I don't want to say it's who he is, because he's not his trauma, but he's been shaped by the things that have been done to him, and it's impossible for him to forget. And he's having such a hard time like moving past it, because it's constant. It's like in his head and his thought, every thought, like, yeah, it's intense. So I am going to try to read the first chapter in part 5 tonight. I need to go take a shower, and then I'm going to sit down and read. And if I can get through part 5 and I still feel like continuing reading, then I'll try to get to chapter 2. But I don't know. It's heavy. So it's like I need to take it in small doses. Else I'm going to it's going to be too much for me if I try to do it all at once, I think. So I finished the first chapter of The Happy Years, and I got about 40-ish pages into the second chapter, so I got a decent chunk read today. Still the same as my last update. It's just very heavy. There's a lot. It's a lot to read. It's just, I get why people say that this is the most depressing book that they've ever read, because it's a lot. It's very, very heavy. I will say though that the writing is really, really good. That I just really like the writing style, and how Hanya Yanagihara tells the story. Because I mean, it's a long book. It's an 800-page book, so the writing would need to be good to get people to read it, especially for a contemporary. But the writing is very, very good. I really like the writing style. But I am going to be done for tonight. So I know I'm in the middle of a chapter, but there is a break. So I'm going to stop there for the night, and I will pick up again tomorrow. Hello everyone. It's been a couple days since my last update. I did not read any of A Little Life yesterday because I didn't want to. So I think I'm going to try to finish the second chapter in part 5. I think I have about 50 pages or so left, and then take another little break, and then try to finish part 5 today. So that is my plan currently. Just wanted to tell you that I am going to be picking it up today. I'm hoping that I can finish it. I have less than 300 pages left, more like 230 left. So I'm hoping I can get like another 150 pages read today or so, and get to part 6 today, so that I can try to finish it this weekend. I'll check in before the night is over and see what it is I've read. What? I just finished part 5. So I finished part 5, and then I took a break. I played some games on Zoom with a few friends, and now I have like 100 pages left, and I'm gonna finish it tonight. So I'll update you when I'm done. I just finished. I think I'm gonna take the night to sit with it, and I will wrap up tomorrow. Hey everyone, it is the next day after I finished reading A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. So I just figured I would kind of wrap up my reading experience and give some of my final thoughts on the book, because last night when I finished, I was pretty upset. I definitely was crying and just trying to process all of my emotions that the book drew out of me. So one of my first thoughts that I have about this book is that I wouldn't actually ever recommend it to anybody, despite the fact that I am giving this book 5 out of 5 stars, and I did really like it. I feel weird saying that because I did like it. I don't know. Every time I say that, it feels weird because like I hated the things that happened in here. But I liked how they were explored and they were talked about, I guess, and I liked the writing. I think I said that about 500 times in the reading vlog. But I wouldn't recommend this, not because I think it's a bad book, but because I think this is the kind of book that a person needs to decide on their own without outside influences if they want to pick it up, and knowing full well what it's about and what the content warnings and everything are, if that's something that they still want to read. So that is my first thing about it. My second thing, kind of going along with that, is this book is often referred to as torture porn or tragedy porn. And I can see kind of where people are coming from, because this book is sad. Everything that happens in here is sad. It's a sad, depressing book. That's the whole point of the book. But to classify it as torture porn or tragedy porn, I think takes away from the whole experience itself. I think that just because this book is sad and it kind of pummels you with emotions doesn't make it a bad book. Actually, I think it's brilliant. I think it really shows how life is not always pretty, and in some cases it's never really pretty. It's always like a constant barrage of pain, and sometimes there is no silver lining, there is no upside to it. Sometimes it's just awful and depressing. Going along with that torture porn, tragedy porn discussion, I feel like Hanya Yanagihara gets criticized for manipulating the reader, because they spend the first 200 or so pages making you really get to know the characters and get to care for them and feel for them, and then she spends the last 600 pages just ripping them apart and putting them through hell and doing it to pull an emotion from the reader. And I would counter that critique by saying, like, that's what all art does. It's made to pull a reaction or an emotion from the reader, the viewer, the listener. It's meant to draw an emotion out of whoever is consuming that piece of art. So I would say that it's not a manipulation. And if we are going to consider this book a manipulation then of the reader, then we would need to consider a manipulation from all artists who are trying to draw an emotion from somebody, because that's exactly the whole point of creating the art, if that makes sense. I thought that Jude's character did a good job of portraying what it's like to deal with past traumas, and how that can affect you later in life and how it kind of always stays with you, and that it's something that a person will carry with them for their life. And it's not to say that a person can't overcome their trauma and heal from it. It's just to say that it still affects that person. It's still with them. It's not just something that they can shove away and forget about. And this book also explored the fact that Jude didn't really get to deal with his demons. He just kind of let it consume him more. Like in the beginning, it talks about like how he needs to talk about his past and like what's happened to him in order to move past it. And he doesn't get that opportunity. And then it becomes harder and harder for him to talk about what happened to him as the years go by. And eventually it becomes like so difficult for him that he just never tells anybody. And I think that's a really important point to take away from this book, is that you shouldn't just shove the feelings away and not want to bother anybody with them. I think it's just important to recognize that people need to talk about their traumas in order to help them move past it and help them process it and help them overcome it. Oh, one part of the book, or one quote that is really sticking with me, probably out of most of the quotes, because like I said, I loved the writing, is the quote that Jude says about the axiom of equality on page 386 of the paperback copy. The person I was will always be the person I am, he realizes, and then he says X equals X. That is sticking out to me. He really thinks that he is his trauma and he'll never get past it. Just that part where he's like, it's never going to change. It's always going to be like this. Like, I'm never going to get better. It really made me like, yep, this book is not going to be a happy story. It's not going to be a happy ending. And I kind of knew it really at that point. So reading about Jude dealing with Willem's death was definitely the hardest for me. That was what drew the most emotion out of me. That's when I really started like sobbing so bad that like I couldn't read the words on the page because my eyes were blurry with tears. It really broke my heart when the person that he has trusted and has loved through the whole story is taken from him. That was just like nearly unbearable to read about. There was also one point in my notes. I wrote a lot of notes for this book. Normally I write 2 to 3 pages for a book. And this, I had 11 pages of notes. But there was one point in my notes where I wrote, like, I'm just reading this at this point to get it done, because like this is so hard to read that I don't want to read about it anymore because it's so much to take. And I think that was intentional on Hanya Yanagihara's part. Like, I think that they wrote it because that's what Jude felt would happen if he shared his story with someone. Like, he never wanted to share anything about his past because he thought it would be too much for them to handle. He thought that they would be disgusted with him and wouldn't want to hear anymore and wouldn't want to talk to him anymore or have them, like, him in their lives, and would just want to shut the whole thing down. So he never shared anything. And like, that's exactly what I was feeling when I was reading, was that like I didn't want to hear anymore. This was too much for me to handle, and I wanted to shut the whole thing down. And I thought that was kind of like so that was pretty crazy. Also, the title, A Little Life, like there were so many meanings for the title that it's just genius. Like, there's that part where Brother Luke says that Jude needs to give the clients a little life. He needs to not just like lay there and take it while they're raping him. He needs to show them a little life. And that was a pretty twisted interpretation of the title. There was also like the fact that Jude thinks that he has a little life, and his life is little and meaningless and doesn't really matter. There's also the fact that the reader is seeing just a little piece of someone's life. So even though it's an 800-page book and we really feel like we get an in-depth look at Jude's life. We really don't. We kind of just get like a little piece of it. And this book is set for, you know, over 5 decades, really, if you really think about it. And in the span of 5 or 6 days, I consumed that whole story. And that's not the same as knowing his whole life. This is just a little piece of it. And there's also the meaning that a little piece of your life can affect your whole life. Like, it was just, there's just so many different ways to interpret the title. And I feel like I could just go on and on thinking about it, but I really thought that that was interesting. So those are my final thoughts on the book. I think I said I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I really think that this is going to be like a classic of our time. I would definitely consider this a modern classic. Like, I feel like it's going to be so timeless, and that it'll be something that will stick with me for the rest of my life. There are very few books that I would say are like truly life-changing. Like, there are books that can affect me and can stay with me for a while, but this book in particular is just, it's going to stay with me for the rest of my life. This is going to be a book that I won't be able to stop thinking about for a long time. So yeah, that is going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for following me along on this crazy, depressing ride of a book. But I hope that you enjoyed watching my reactions and hearing my thoughts. And I will see you all in my next video. Bye!